My brother Simon told me my wife was uninvited to his wedding while he was checking his watch. I could hear the faint, muffled sounds of a city street through the phone, a distant siren, the murmur of people. He was somewhere important, somewhere busy, and this call was just another item on his to-do list. He didn't shout, he didn't sound angry. He delivered the line with the same casual authority he used when ordering a ridiculously expensive wine he knew nothing about. "It's just better this way, Leo," he said, the words smooth and practiced. "Mom's been so stressed with the planning." Isabel she adds a certain intensity to things. Intensity. That was the word he chose for my wife's intelligence. For her refusal to nod along silently at family gatherings when my mother would rewrite history or Simon would inflate his latest business success. They called her intensity, I called it integrity. I was standing in my classroom surrounded by the ghosts of history. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. On the blackboard behind me were the causes of the American Revolution: taxation without representation, a fight against injustice. It felt cruelly ironic. I asked him to explain. I wanted to hear him struggle, to force him to assemble a real reason from the flimsy excuses provided by our mother. "Come on, Leo, don't make this a thing," he sighed, the manufactured patience in his voice more insulting than any shout. "Stephanie agrees, it's our day. We just want a peaceful, happy vibe, no debates about politics. No questions about the estate." There it was, the real reason hiding behind the complaints about vibe. A month earlier, Isabel, a journalist with a mind like a steel trap, had asked a simple question about a discrepancy in our late father's estate documents. The chill that fell over the dinner table was so profound, you could have dated it like a geologic layer. Before hanging up, Simon delivered the final, polished stone of humiliation. "Look, it's a family event. We need to present a united front. Just come alone. Be a brother for me, for Dad's memory." He used our father's memory as a weapon, our father who had loved Isabel, who had admired her intensity because it reminded him of his own mother. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I didn't say anything. I just let the silence stretch until he got uncomfortable and made an excuse about another call. When the line went dead, I stared at the phone in my hand. He hadn't just uninvited my wife. He had, in his own slick and sterile way, declared that she wasn't family, that the life I had built, the person I had chosen, was an inconvenient subplot in the grand narrative of his success. My family portrait was a masterpiece of deception. Simon was the vibrant, golden center, my mother the regal artist, and I was the shadow in the corner, necessary for composition but otherwise ignored. Telling Isabel was like watching a beautiful, hand-blown glass vase develop a crack in slow motion. She tried to be strong for me. She squared her shoulders and said, "We always knew they were cowards, Leo." But I saw the tremor in her hands as she made tea. I saw the way her eyes glistened as she stared out the window. She wasn't just hurt by the exclusion, she was hurt for me. She knew this was just the latest chapter in a lifetime of being sidelined. That night, sleep was a foreign country I couldn't visit. The next afternoon, a courier service I didn't recognize buzzed our apartment. He had me sign for a thick, heavy envelope. It felt oddly formal. My name was handwritten on the front in a spidery, elegant script I hadn't seen in years. Uncle Arthur, my father's older brother. The family exile. Inside was a single, old-fashioned skeleton key, heavy and ornate, attached to a simple note. The paper was thick, creamy. The note read, "Leo, your father saw the rot in the foundation long before the house started to shake. He kept the original blueprints. It's time you saw them too. Storage Unit 312, Oak Creek Pass." And beneath that, a quote I'd heard him say once years ago at my father's funeral. "Your mother builds houses of cards, Leo. Don't be surprised when a single breath of truth brings it all down." Holding that key felt like holding a grenade. What rot? What blueprints? My father was a quiet, contemplative man, an architect. He designed buildings to last for centuries. He believed in solid foundations above all else. Uncle Arthur had been pushed out of the family a decade ago. My mother, Margaret, had told everyone he was a bitter, jealous man who couldn't stand to see my father's success. Arthur's real crime, I suspected, was that he saw my mother too clearly. He wasn't fooled by her performance of the gracious matriarch. He saw the cold, calculating ambition underneath. Isabel saw the key and the note, and the journalist in her came alive. "Oak Creek Pass," she said, already typing into her laptop. "That's 20 miles out of town, the old industrial park. Leo, what do you think is in there?" I didn't know. But for the first time since Simon's call, the numb fog of humiliation began to recede, replaced by a sharp, cold spike of curiosity. My brother wanted me to attend his wedding alone, a symbol of my compliance. Little did he know he had just given me the two things I needed most, a reason to search for the truth and a week to find it. The past is never really past. It's a blueprint that shapes the rooms we live in today. As we drove out to the storage facility, the landscape of my childhood unspooled in my mind. I remembered one summer when I was 12 and Simon was 8. The centerpiece of our town's Founders' Day was the Pinewood Derby race. I spent a month in the garage with my father, learning about aerodynamics, weight distribution, the physics of friction. We crafted my car with surgical precision. Simon, on the other hand, slapped his together in an afternoon, more interested in the paint job than the engineering. The night before the race, I saw my mother slip into the garage after we were all in bed. I didn't think anything of it. The next day, Simon's car was on the starting line looking suspiciously sleek, its wheels perfectly polished, its weight flawlessly balanced. It looked like the demonstration model from the hobby shop. He won, of course. My technically superior car came in third. Simon held the big plastic trophy over his head and my mother beamed, telling all the other parents that her youngest had a natural gift for winning. My father just looked at me with a sad, knowing expression and said quietly, "Sometimes, Leo, the best car doesn't win the race." He never confronted her, he never corrected the lie, he just tried to teach me how to live with the quiet disappointment. That pattern repeated itself through our lives. When it was time for college, I wanted to study history, to become a teacher. My mother called it a noble but impractical hobby. She said, "Your brother is the one with the head for business. We need to invest in him. He will be the one to carry on your father's legacy." Their version of my father's legacy had nothing to do with blueprints or foundations. It had to do with wealth, with status. They paid for Simon's elite private university, his tailored suits, his internships in the city. I was given a modest allowance for a state school and a constant stream of commentary about the financial sacrifices they were making for me. It was a brilliant strategy. They made me feel perpetually indebted and grateful, even as they were systematically kneecapping my ambitions. I never complained. I worked part-time jobs, studied hard, and became a teacher. I built a life I was proud of, a life of substance, if not of glamour. In their eyes, that was my greatest failure. I had settled. I wasn't a winner. The storage facility was a desolate place, a grid of anonymous metal doors under a pale, washed-out sky. Unit 312 was at the far end of a long, echoing corridor. The key slid into the rusty lock and turned with a groan of protest. I rolled up the heavy door and we were hit by the smell of dust, old paper, and time. The unit was packed to the ceiling with my father's things: drafting tables, boxes of books, rolled-up architectural plans. It was a mausoleum of his professional life, a life my mother had packed away and forgotten the moment he was gone. "Where do we even start?" Isabel asked, her voice hushed. I saw it in the back corner. A heavy, dark green footlocker, the kind used in the military. It had a sturdy padlock, but it wasn't the lock that caught my attention. It was the small, almost invisible symbol of a compass rose etched into the wood beside it. It was my father's personal mark. He put it on everything that truly mattered to him, and there was no keyhole. It was a combination lock, a simple 4-digit one. My father was a man of habit and sentiment. I closed my eyes and tried to think. What 4 numbers would he use to protect his most important secrets? It came to me in a rush: 1 to 9, 6 to 8, the year he and my mother were married. But also the year Uncle Arthur had left for the army, a year of union and of division. I dialed the numbers, the lock clicked open. Lifting the lid felt like opening a tomb. There was no smell of dust inside. It was clean, organized, and sealed against the elements. The contents were not memories. They were evidence. It was filled with dozens of neatly labeled file folders. The top one was labeled Simon Croft, Sterling Wealth Management, Client File, Gable. I opened it. Inside were official-looking statements showing a healthy portfolio for an elderly client named Eleanor Gable. But stapled to the back was another set of statements for the same woman, these printed from a different system, showing a balance of almost zero. I picked up another file. Client File, Peterson. Same story. One set of glowing, fabricated reports, another set of devastatingly real ones showing total losses. Isabel, her journalistic senses on high alert, began pulling out files and spreading them on the dusty concrete floor. "Leo, this is a Ponzi scheme," she whispered, her face pale. "Simon's not a wealth manager, he's a thief. He's been sending his clients fake statements while their money is gone." But it was the folder at the very bottom that stopped my heart. It was thicker than the others. The label simply read, "The Foundation." Inside were not client files, but our family's own financial documents. There was a copy of a second mortgage taken out on my parents' home, the home my father had designed and built with his own hands. The signature on the loan document was a passable but definite forgery of my father's name. A series of bank transfers showed the money from that loan, nearly $500,000, had been funneled into Simon's firm just as some of his early clients started asking difficult questions. My brother hadn't just defrauded strangers. He had used our family home, our inheritance, our entire history as collateral to cover up his crimes. And there, in a separate sealed envelope, were copies of emails between Simon and my mother. Simon panicking about a looming audit. My mother, cold and pragmatic, instructing him on how to secure the loan, who to talk to at the bank, how to hide the paperwork from my father. She wasn't just an accomplice, she was the architect of the cover-up. The final document was a handwritten letter from my father, addressed to me. His usually strong, clear handwriting was shaky, labored. He must have written this in his final days. My dear Leo, it started. If you are reading this, it is because my own courage failed me. I discovered the truth months ago. The rot in our foundation. I confronted your mother and your brother. I planned to go to the authorities. But your mother, she begged me. She told me it would destroy the family, that Simon was just in over his head. She swore they would make it right. She appealed to my love for her, my weakness for our family's image. I gave them 1 month to begin liquidating assets and paying back the clients. I was a fool, I see that now. They are not fixing it. They are just digging a deeper hole, planning a more elaborate lie. My heart is not strong enough to fight them anymore, son. This proof is all I have left to give you. The victims, Leo, they are good people. My friends, my colleagues, they trusted my son. They trusted my family. Do not let them be forgotten. Your integrity is the last true thing this family has left. Do what you must. The letter fell from my fingers. My father didn't just have a heart attack. My mother and my brother, with their lies and their betrayal, had broken his heart. The weight of his final wish, his final, desperate plea for justice, settled onto my shoulders. Suddenly, everything became painfully clear. Isabel wasn't uninvited from the wedding because she was intense. She was uninvited because she was a threat. One pointed question from her, one curious glance at a vendor's invoice, and she might have started pulling the thread that could unravel their entire fraudulent world. Simon's wedding wasn't a celebration of love. It was a theatrical performance. It was a grand spectacle designed to project an image of wealth and stability, to reassure current investors and attract new ones. They were using the wedding as the final set piece in their criminal production, paid for with the life savings of retirees, of their friends, of the people my father had urged me to protect. The label they gave me my whole life, the simple one, the unambitious one, it was their most important tool. They needed me to be passive. They needed me to be uncurious. My perceived failure was the cornerstone of their criminal success. They had underestimated me. They had counted on me to play my part, to be the quiet, simple shadow in the corner. They had no idea I was about to step into the light. The drive back to the city was silent. Isabel didn't speak. She just put her hand on my arm, a silent transfer of strength. My mind was a storm. Part of me, the part that had been trained since childhood to avoid conflict, to keep the peace, wanted to just leak the documents to a reporter. Let it happen anonymously. Let the justice system handle it from a safe distance. But then I pictured my father's face, the disappointment in his eyes the day of the Pinewood Derby. I thought of his last letter, the shaking hand of a man who knew he had been defeated by his own family. A quiet police report wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't honor his struggle. It wouldn't deliver the kind of justice that a lifetime of public humiliation and private betrayal deserved. The humiliation had always been their weapon. They had used it to control me, to diminish me. Now I would use it to expose them. They had built their stage, sent out their invitations, and prepared for their standing ovation. I would simply change the final act of the play. I spent the next 4 days in a state of hyper-focused calm. While Simon and my mother were tasting cakes and approving flower arrangements, I was becoming an expert on my brother's crimes. Isabel helped me organize the documents, creating a clear timeline of the fraud. Using the client list from the Foot Locker and public records, I found contact information for 3 of the most devastated victims. I made the most difficult phone calls of my life. I spoke to Leonard Gable, an 80-year-old retired music teacher and one of my mother's oldest friends. I spoke to a man named Marcus Peterson, a 68-year-old mechanic who had invested his entire pension after my father had recommended Simon's firm. The stories were heartbreaking. They had trusted Simon because they had trusted my father. They were ashamed, scared, and saw no way to get their money back. I told them I had my father's files. I told them I had a plan. I didn't ask them to be brave, I just asked them to be present. I promised them I would do the rest. My final call was to Uncle Arthur. When I told him what I'd found, he was quiet for a long time. Then he just said, "It's time, Leo. I'll be there. Your father will be there in spirit." The wedding day was a spectacle of obscene luxury. It was held at a historic botanical garden under a massive glass conservatory dripping with white orchids and shimmering lights. Hundreds of guests in tuxedos and designer gowns mingled, sipping champagne. I saw my brother Simon moving through the crowd, radiating a kind of triumphant glow. He was the king in his court, accepting congratulations, his arm possessively around his new bride. My mother was even more resplendent, dressed in a sweeping gown of silver silk, playing the part of the proud matriarch to perfection. When Simon saw me alone, he gave me a condescendingly sympathetic look. He clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Thanks for coming, brother, knew you'd do the right thing." He thought my solitary presence was his victory, a sign of my surrender. He had no idea it was a declaration of war. I found my seat at a table in the back with some distant cousins who barely knew me. I ate nothing. I watched them laugh and toast and dance, all of it funded by theft and lies, and I waited for the speeches to begin. After the main course, the clinking of a glass signaled the start of the toasts. The father of the bride went first, then the maid of honor. Finally, it was Simon's turn. He strode to the microphone, brimming with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. He thanked his new in-laws. He lavished praise on his bride. Then he turned his attention to our mother. "And I have to thank the most incredible woman I know," he said, his voice thick with fake emotion. "My mother, Margaret, she is the rock of our family. She taught me everything I know about business, about ambition, about what it takes to build a legacy." My mother placed a hand over her heart, basking in the applause. Simon raised his glass. "To my mother," he declared, "the architect of my success." As he prepared to take a triumphant sip of champagne, I stood up. I didn't move toward the stage. I simply stood by my table in the back. But in that room, the simple act of one person standing when everyone else was seated was enough to draw every eye. My voice when I spoke was not loud, but it was clear and steady, and it cut through the room's celebratory murmur. "Before you drink to that, Simon," I said, "perhaps you should let everyone know what kind of legacy you've truly built." Simon froze, the glass halfway to his lips. His face went from confusion to a dark, simmering rage. "Leo, sit down," he hissed into the microphone. "Don't ruin this." "Don't you dare!" My mother was on her feet, her face a mask of fury. "Leo, stop this instant. You are making a scene." I took a step forward. "A scene?" I replied, my voice gaining strength. "A scene is when you forge your own father's signature on a loan document. A scene is when you steal the life savings of an 80-year-old woman who has known you since you were a child." A wave of confused whispers washed over the guests. Simon's face had gone sheet white. He slammed the microphone down. "Security," he yelled, "get him out of here." But before any security guards could react, the grand double doors at the back of the conservatory swung silently open. Standing in the doorway were Mrs. Gable, Mr. Peterson, and another elderly man whose life Simon had ruined. They were dressed in their simple Sunday best, looking dignified and terrified, but utterly resolute. They didn't move, they just stood there, a silent, powerful testament to the truth. The guests turned as one to stare at them. "Simon," I called out, my voice ringing with clarity now. "You don't know them, let me introduce you. This is Alina Gable, your mother's friend. You told her you would protect her retirement money. This is Marcus Peterson. You told him his pension was safe. You told them all their money was growing." As I spoke, Mrs. Gable took a small, shuffling step into the room. She looked directly at Simon, her eyes filled not with hate but with a deep, sorrowful disappointment. "Simon," she said, her voice trembling but audible in the dead, silent room. "My husband and I saved that money for 40 years. How could you?" The question hung in the air, simple and devastating. Simon couldn't answer. He just stood there, exposed and pathetic under the shimmering lights. My mother began to shout, calling me a liar, calling them confused old fools. But her hysteria just made her look more guilty. And then a new figure appeared in the doorway behind the victims. A tall, silver-haired man in a perfectly tailored suit, Uncle Arthur. He walked into the room with an air of quiet authority. He wasn't looking at Simon, he was looking at my mother. "The house of cards is falling, Margaret," he said, his voice low but carrying the weight of years of silenced truth. He held up a thick manila folder. "This is a copy of the formal complaint filed this morning with the SEC and the State Attorney General's office. It includes our father's complete files." At the mention of the SEC, a new level of panic erupted. The bride, Stephanie, began to cry. Her father looked at Simon with utter contempt. The perfect wedding, the perfect family, the perfect lie, all dissolving into chaos in a matter of seconds. Two men in sober business suits stepped in behind my uncle, investigators. They walked calmly, purposefully toward the stage. Simon didn't run, he didn't fight. He just stood there, a hollowed-out version of the golden boy he had pretended to be. It was over. The performance was finally, irrevocably over. I didn't stay to watch them escort my brother and my mother away for questioning. I didn't need to. My work was done. I walked over to Mrs. Gable and the others. I thanked them for their courage. Then I walked out of that glass conservatory, away from the shattered spectacle and into the cool night air. The months that followed were a storm of legal proceedings and local news headlines. Simon and my mother's crimes were laid bare for the world to see. They lost everything, their money, their home, their freedom. More importantly, they lost the one thing they truly worshipped, their reputation. Justice for the victims was a slow, imperfect process, but with the evidence from my father's files, they were able to begin the fight to reclaim their lives. For me, there was no sense of giddy victory. There was only a profound, quiet relief. The weight of my family's lies, a weight I had carried unknowingly my whole life, was finally lifted. Isabel and I sold our apartment and moved away. We found a small town where nobody knew our name, where my only title was Mr. Croft, the history teacher. We built a new life, a true life, on a foundation of our own. My whole life, my family taught me that ambition was about seeking money and status, about winning at all costs. But my father, in his final days, tried to teach me a different lesson. Real ambition isn't about the legacy you build for yourself. It's the courage to stand up for what's right, especially when it's hard. They called me the unambitious one, the failure. But in the end, I think I was the only one who truly understood the family business, telling the truth. If you have ever been made to feel small to make someone else feel big, I hope this story gives you strength. If it moved you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Tell me in the comments below, what do you think is the most important legacy to leave behind? And if you want more stories where the truth finally finds its voice, please subscribe. Thank you for listening.